Broadcasting from Salisbury University campus, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7. Putting Delmarva first. Stay tuned for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
Another storm is brewing between the Wicomico County Council and the county executive, this time over appointments. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Wicomico County Executive Bob Culver has reportedly decided not to send his reappointments of the department heads to the council for approval. It issues a charter amendment that was believed to have required the council's okay, but Culver says as he reads the amendment, it does not. This is just the latest saga in a tense relationship that has flared up over time between Culver and the council. Sort out the legal and political tangle of these latest events. In our studio this morning is Greg Bassett. He is editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent, and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, lay out for me the basic issue that Culver has made in terms of his argument that he doesn't have to send these to the council.
So in the charter that was adopted in 2006, when we created the county executive form of government, the council was allowed to confirm the county executive's appointments for department heads. There are 10 department heads that are part of his cabinet. The charter also said that within 6 months after an election, within 6 months of an election, those appointments had to be reconfirmed by the council. So we just had an election last year. It's 6 months would have been this week that Culver was supposed to resubmit those appointments for consideration. There was gossip out there that the council wanted to get rid of 2 of the department heads, perhaps the lawyer, Paul Wilbur, and the rumor was the human resources director, Michelle Ennis. Culver did not want the council to interfere with his appointments, so he has declined to send the nominations. Now, what he is citing is a charter amendment that was also approved in this last election that expanded the council's power to also approve deputy department heads. And that opened up a whole can of worms in terms of overseeing those people. The county executive thinks that he should have total control of the assistants of the deputies, that the council shouldn't have any role in this. It's an expansion of the council's role. He was opposed to it at the time. So what he is saying is that the language in the charter amendment that expanded it out to deputies wiped away the language in the original charter. And the council is saying, no, it's just a supplement. It's just an amendment. It's an addition. It doesn't wipe it away.
So when the charter amendment, as it was written in terms of the election issue for deputies, that was intentionally designed, that was intentionally written not to necessarily include the department head section because they thought that was already covered?
Correct.
Okay, so...
So it's a very complicated thing. But Culver's contention, I think, is probably not true. I think the council's intention was legitimate. Culver's intention is not legitimate based on how I read it and lawyers that I talk to. But he has not followed the spirit of the charter. But the bigger issue here is he sees them as trying to take away his power. There were charter amendments in the midterm elections 2 years ago, which took away some of his powers or gave the council more power. Same thing this last time. Historically, with charter amendments, we have a big charter committee. 20 people meet. They talk about it forever. They vote on it, and then they take it to the council. The council this time, though, in the last 2 elections where charters were determined, charter amendments were determined, the council kind of did it on their own, like within their own little body. And he sees it as them trying to take his powers away.
Yeah, I guess there's a citing of a 1975 case, Allegheny County, talking about holdover appointments. How does that apply?
It barely applies. That situation up in Allegheny County was about a zoning commission reappointment. It was another political thing where a new regime came in. They wanted to get rid of the people that were on the planning commission, but they were allowed to keep holdover appointments. So Paul Wilbur found that. That's the only Maryland case law that he could find, he said, that kind of applies to this situation. But to me, it's sort of an apples and oranges thing.
So as I read, particularly your piece, was that Paul Wilbur, who told the council this is what was going on with Culver, seemed embarrassed.
Yeah, that was my word, embarrassed.
Okay, tell me a little bit of why you said that.
He was clearly uncomfortable because he was having to tell the council that he did not support his boss's position on this. Now, the whole county attorney thing is another big mess. One of Culver's campaign promises was to do away with the county attorney's office as designed by the charter, because there were several attorneys and it was a very expensive proposition. He's never created that county's attorney's office. He hired Paul Wilbur to be the county attorney, and I think Paul bills by the hour. Now, Bob Culver will argue that he's saving about $300,000 a year by doing it this way, by not having a legal office. But you've got a lawyer that works essentially for the county executive in the county, who's the county attorney, but he kind of comes and goes. And because of that, the council has gone and hired their own attorney, Robert Taylor, who sits at the table and gives them advice at the meetings, because they don't necessarily trust the executive's attorney on this thing. So you've got two competing attorneys, basically, one for the legislative branch, one for the executive branch. In this case, Paul presented the county executive's arguments, but then, under questioning, said that he did not support those arguments.
You mentioned, by the way, Taylor and Wilbur. I got here; they were long time names. What's with Robert Taylor being very critical of this Salisbury City Council, and he's been here. I mean, tell me about these two individuals.
Yeah, they're both very fascinating. Paul Wilbur has a long history of being a government attorney. He's been the town attorney for many local jurisdictions and for zoning boards. He was the town attorney, the city solicitor in Salisbury for a long time, and he advised Barry Tillman when she was mayor. Certainly Mr. Taylor was an opponent, political opponent, as a citizen of Salisbury, of Barry Tillman, and he would go to meetings and he would offer these lawyerly observations about things all the time. I remember one really bad meeting where they ousted a council president and elected someone else, and Mr. Taylor stood up and called it, Salisbury has become a banana republic, and he would create words for journalists to write down. But he always had an opinion about what was going on in Salisbury, and certainly a lot of those opinions conflicted with what Paul Wilbur was doing as an attorney. So there was a kind of a personal, historical thing going on there, and now here they are at the same table, but on the opposite sides of the table.
So what can the council do? I mean, if Culver doesn't send over the appointments?
Yeah, so that was their question. Last Tuesday night, they had the big meeting, and the meeting was taken up by the parents from Mardella who were upset about the capital improvement delay for their school. But then afterward, after the room cleared out, the council continued to meet, and Mr. Taylor gave the council some advice. That was the question: what do we do now? It seems like it's headed to a court of law for a judge to decide somehow. Most people don't want to do that because it's going to be an expensive legal process. The county's going to have to spend money to defend this and to prosecute this. But Mr. Taylor suggested, and I thought it was rather bizarre, that perhaps security could, if the council could go ahead and assume that the people that are in the office now are the people that the county executive would reappoint, and therefore they could vote on these people. And if the council did not approve them to continue, then they could be removed from office. And the question was, well, how do we, remove them from office? Do we lock them out of the building? Do we escort them to their car? There was no.
Sounds very familiar, but go ahead.
It sounded like a police state thing to me, but there wasn't really a result there. I know if I was a department head, the council voted to fire me, but my boss wants to keep me. I can't wait to go to court and sue for that. I mean, that would be a real mess, I think, in terms of a human resources issue and an employment issue. So I think they're sort of stuck right now. And I think it's going to head to a court. Now, one of the things I need to report on this week is, do they really go through a court process, or do they do some mediation? Do they get a retired judge to come in and hear both sides and make a ruling? Can they agree on who this would be? And then the other complexity is that because Mr. Wilbur is involved as a reappointment, he cannot be involved in this. He's got a conflict. So he cannot represent the county. The county will have to hire an outside attorney, which the council has to approve because they appropriate the money to make all this happen.
Was there also a suggestion that maybe just not to pay these department heads?
Yeah, that was one issue. That's one way that the council could block the payment. It would be a misappropriation of funds to pay someone that we had not authorized to be in that position.
Although they don't write the checks.
They don't write the checks, but they authorize the funding. They could cut that budget.
So this is as I indicated, this is sort of a long-standing tension between the Culver and the council. What is the story with that? I mean, certainly from the beginning there was conflict, but even in the last election when he was up for re-election, I talked to people. leadership people who were dissatisfied with Culver's leadership, and that included people who were Republicans, people who may have sided, say, with John Cannon, the president of the council. What's going on in that dynamic?
Yeah, that's the other thing. They're all Republicans, which is interesting. So there's
Right.
not a partisan issue here. Now, the council does have 3 Democrats on it, but they mostly sit silent through these things and kind of watch the Republicans kind of eat at each other. So I don't see a party issue being there. But basically, it's just a matter of who's in charge. Bob feels like he's driving the boat. The way I've described it is the council wants to be in the front seat with him, and they want to hold the map and point out directions and let him drive. That's fine, but they're going to decide where we're going. And it's just that constant legislative, executive branch tension that you see all the time. But Bob wants to protect his power and have the ability to do things his way. And the council wants to hold him in check, but also do things their way. So it's kind of elbows under the basket, I guess is one of the analogies.
How does that contrast with his predecessor, Rick Pollitt?
Rick was a little bit different. I think Rick wasn't as hands-on in terms of things, but Rick certainly had his issues with the council. He had a Democratic council for a long time. It was very partisan. Republicans took over. They sniped at Rick a lot. He didn't always take the bait on that stuff. But he also had much more of a bureaucracy in terms of he had like 2 deputies, and he let them really run things. This is nothing against Rick, but I felt like he was more ceremonial. He cut ribbons and he was the ambassador for the county. But Bob's really in there making really minor decisions, very, very detailed decisions about what goes on. He's very, very involved in everything.
Now, the 2 people that you indicate that might not be reappointed, what's their story, and what does the council necessarily have against them?
Well, with Wilbur, it's interesting. The whole county attorney system bugs them that Bob's not following the way the charter intended it for it to be. But I think what happens with these lawyer guys is they do a lot of their work is in the closed door meetings, so you don't see that because it's personal issues, it's property acquisition stuff. So there's things that go on in those meetings where there might be tensions and they feel like they get bad advice or they just no rapport, things that I can't quite figure out. I remember there was a thing about an expense issue with a development down off Riverside Drive where some contractors were in. Paul was supposed to review some invoices for expenses. He told them he had. Then Bob Taylor announced that he had gone through and he had reviewed them and he found some stuff. So there was like some tension about that. Like maybe Paul had misled them. I think it was just a miscommunication. The thing with the HR director goes back to this from very early in Bob's term, of the first really ugly encounter that these 2 groups had with each other. Where Bob had authorized a raise for Ms. Ennis. It was discovered in an audit of the county. The auditor said, we don't know what happened here, but someone needs to look at it. Someone needs to ask some questions. And Bob was offended that they would ask questions. It's up to him to make these raises. He's allowed to do this. He controls his budgets. They authorize the money, but he controls what happens underneath the big picture of the spending. And there was an ugly back and forth with some lawyers and some auditors, and I think that also caused some trouble. And when you think about it, too, the HR director in any organization is never the most popular person because they instill the discipline.
Right.
They fire people, so the employees aren't necessarily lined up to love the HR director.
So where do you see this going in terms of his relationship with the council over the next 3 years or so? I mean, in one sense, and sort of an observation of mine, but in the last election, Culver kind of skated out a bit in the sense that the Democratic vote, whatever that happened to be, got split off to an independent, and then there was an independent candidate, and then, of course, it was Culver, so that Culver was able to actually win re-election. How do you see this going forward politically then?
I think Bob's safe for as long as he wants the job. I think the county, things are going pretty well. He did an amazing thing this year where he agreed to fund the school board budget for the first time ever completely, $800,000. On the back end of that, now he's getting beaten up because in order to fund that, they've delayed a renovation of the Mardella School that's in the capital plan. It's different money, but it's all money. One of the things that has been reported that I'm working on this week is he's also put off the sheriff's office for a year. That was another political promise that was very popular with people. But where it's going in terms of all this stuff, well, in terms of his election, I think he's fine. But the council members say to me that when they're out in the public, people just go, why can't you get along with Bob? You know, what's going on? And Bob says when he's out, people are like, what's going on with you and the council? They don't really understand it. They just know there's something weird going on there. But it really is just the branches of government, each exercising their own power and maybe not respecting each other the way that they could or should.
So are you optimistic this is going to get resolved one way or the other? Or is it going to be an expensive resolution?
I think it'll be an expensive resolution.
Yeah.
I don't see any. There's nothing to indicate right now that either side is going to back down. I did get a letter overnight. I was leaked a letter. Where Paul Wilbur, the attorney, sent a letter yesterday to the county council, or to the county executive, saying that some council members had approached him and urged him to resign. But he wasn't going to resign because if he were to do so now, the county would have no legal representation and it would leave the county vulnerable. So he will stay in office until a reappointment is made. But he doesn't really say whether he wants a reappointment from if someone else to take his job or not. So I've got some reporting to do on that. So that's developing. But I think they're going to have to go to a court thing and let the court say that not necessarily that the county executive is breaking the charter, but he's not complying with the charter.
By the way, assuming we talked about the Democrats for a moment, what are they doing in all of this? Do they have a particular position, or what are they saying?
I think the only one that I've heard say anything so far is Bill McCain, and he was a council leader when he was on the council before. He occasionally says stuff, but Ernie Davis and Josh Hastings haven't really said anything on this issue.
By the way, Mark Kilmer, he's leaving, is he not?
He is. He's returning to his native Idaho, and Mark is essential. He's he's kind of the key figure in all of this because Mark is a charter guy. He loves the charter, and he's been the proponent for many of these charter changes throughout. And he's just come in, and he worked in Washington, D.C. for a long time on Capitol Hill. He's very much into that process. He's come in, he's asked questions about why does the charter say this and why does it say that, and council members have complained that they would like this power, that power, and Mark's like, we can fix the charter and give ourselves that power. So a lot of these charter changes have been driven by him. He's been the point man. He's the person who explains the charter changes to people like me and the public. So his departure, I think, will change things. Maybe the charter won't change as much because there's not someone who knows how to manipulate those gears. But he's been a good councilman. He's going to be a missing piece.
So, by the way, we mentioned a moment ago, Mardella.
Yes.
Seemed to explode in the face of everybody, particularly Culver, who did not seem to anticipate this happening.
He didn't get out in front of it like he really needed to, which is a shame. So what happens with these capital budgets, if you look at the capital budgets, they're 5 years out, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff on the wish list. Once Beaver Run, which we all thought Beaver Run, which is getting rebuilt next year, we all thought that was going to be a big fight. It ended up not being a fight. And then the next thing on the list was the renovation of Mardella. So the school board building commission went through all the processes. They met with everyone in Mardella. They considered 3 plans. One was to close the school and build it somewhere else. The other was to tear the school down and build a new school on the same site or next door. The third option was to renovate the existing school. The public wanted that school to be renovated. So they went ahead and put in the capital budget that that's what we'll do. Well, with all the stuff that's coming down the pike with minimum wage increase, it's going to cost the county $7 million because they have to adjust everyone's salary. We've got the Kerwin Commission, which is out there, that's going to ask that more money be appropriated for education in different areas. There's thought that there's going to be a recession probably a year from now, or like a year from this November, when it would probably hit. And they're still smarting from the last recession because it was just so brutal for the county. With all those considerations, they said maybe we don't want to spend all this money right now. We want to hold off. This is all borrowed money, but it's money that they have to make payments on, certainly. So they said, you know, Mardella's gone 60 years with the school, and there hasn't been a renovation there since like 1980 or 82. Every year that school wins an award from the comptroller's office, his Silver Hammer Award, because they're able to keep a failing facility going so well. The maintenance people just do a great job out there. There's a lot of pride. But anyway, people got this idea they were going to get this new school. It's been put off a year, and they were very upset. Now, this happens all the time with projects. Like I said, the sheriff's office has been put off a year, but you haven't heard about that yet. If the sheriff makes a stink about it, then you'll hear about it. But I think maybe he understands what's going on, and he'll still get it. He'll just get it a year from now. But this happens all the time, but these people really thought that it was coming, they were going to get it, and now they're not, at least not for another year.
Do you get any sense why they you've got such a turnout, I mean, of people showing up for this particular project as opposed to, say, other projects outside of, say, for instance, the sheriff's office, which is sort of a singular thing. But
when you go to the Mardella High School, in middle and high school, there's a sense of pride that's there that is not like in any other school. It's a small school. It's a small community. It's a tight community. They all talk to each other. They're very, they feel like the Salisbury schools get all the attention and they're kind of forgotten. There's maybe a little chip on the shoulder kind of thing going on. They're a high-performing school because they're small. There's a lot of attention given by the teachers, which is a great thing, and they're just very proud. I mean, an example of their pride is, oh no, you can't tear down the school and build a new one. You need to fix the one that we attended all those years, because they want that memory. They want that continuation of who they are. It's a very prideful area.
Do you have any idea how many students they got?
I forget what it is. Yeah. I should know that.
That's all right.
But it's a really small number. It's like 600, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And at one point, I think I read that Culver just simply said, "Well, maybe what you really need is a new school."
He did. And I was wondering if he had been paying attention to what had happened in all those hearings, because that was not what they wanted. But from his point of view, and I get that. Financially, in terms of the environment, there's a failing septic system out there. The ground is not great for that septic thing. Really, you should tear that school down and build a new one. And I recalled the fight in Pittsville in the 70s when they closed the Pittsville High School and moved everyone to Parkside. That was really the right thing to do, but that community is still angry that they closed their high school. 50 years later, whatever it's been now, it was 1977 or 6. They're still upset about that. And I know it would be the same thing in Mardella. I mean, you see this argument in Somerset County all the time, where their cost per student is so high because they have so much infrastructure, because they have all these neighborhood schools. And, really in Somerset, they should close Crisfield School and send everyone to school in Princess Anne. That would make sense financially, but as a community, no one wants to do that. And it's the same thing with Mardella. I mean, in terms of pure dollars and cents, close Mardella, let them go to school at Bennett and Parkside and Y High. Those schools could absorb that population, but that community is proud of its school and wants to keep it.
So, as I understand it, Culver suggested that maybe there might be some money then for the roof, something like that. He's going to negotiate something like that?
Yeah, they need a new roof at West Side, so he's going to put that off a year, put some of that money. That's the proposal right now, and I know they're meeting about that this week, and I need to do more reporting on it. Take some of that money and throw that in to help get things started in Mardella. It's not going to, anything that starts now, it still takes 5 or 6 years. The kids that are there now are not going to benefit from this. It's kids that are at the middle school level or elementary that might benefit later. But yeah, that's the idea, that he might be able to advance the ball somewhat that way and take some of the heat off.
So how does this, a minute left or so, how does this contrast to how the city of Salisbury is operating? When I first got here, it was Salisbury City Council and mayor would seem to be dysfunctional. The county seemed to be running fairly smoothly, and now it seems like we have this reversal.
I think in Salisbury, you have a battle of ideas. You always had a battle of ideas before. Everyone thought different things about the future of the city and what should happen. Now there's just one idea. The guy with the idea in the room is Jake Day, and he makes a proposal for something, and people sit there and they go, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know how to argue with that vision because, and even if they don't agree, they love the enthusiasm, and then he's going to try stuff. He has the guts to try all these things that I would, there's a list, like, we're going to build an amphitheater. I'm like, that's dumb. Well, it's beautiful. So, it's a wonderful thing. The traffic circle that they're about to build on Carroll Street, it's like, that's not going to work. But, well, the idea is things can't get any worse. Let's just try it, And when he talks like that, it's really easy to rally around him. There's a lot of sincerity, and he's got all the best ideas in the room. And I think I'm not in his pocket that way. I just see that. That's how people react to him. Where at the county level, they're still like, no, I think we should do this, and no, I think the hearing the other night of Mardella, someone made some comment about the Salisbury schools getting all the money, that they're favored by the county and all this stuff, and people applauded because they feel like that people care more about Salisbury than they do Mardella. Is that true or not? I don't think it's true, but that's certainly the attitude, and people rallied around that.
We've been speaking with Greg Bassett. He's editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent. A large piece, by the way. I think it was in last week's paper, but you can pick it up online. Very detailed. In some ways, when you read about how people weren't sending up people to be appointed and so on and so forth, I thought I was reading about Washington, D.C.
Well, it's one of those issues I can't tell. It's a boring thing, but so if you kind of overwrite it, maybe people will read it.
Maybe.
Appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us.
Thank you.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Production and audio engineering by Chris Rank. Hosted by Don Rush. For podcasts, visit delmarvapublicradio.net or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on Pack 14.